Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to this new session of the Collaboration and Unity Basics course. On today's session, we will be covering mainly the Unity editor. So we will go over a bunch of stuff, starting with getting familiarized with the folder structure that we will have to, like we often use on the Unity project. But this is a little bit up to you guys. Like you can decide to change it. It's however you feel more comfortable. But I will just give you how I do it and how it's more standardized. As well, then we will start working on importing some assets from a package that I will show you guys. We will create a scene. We will start making our backgrounds, creating some of the layers, and assembling our main scene. In this process, I will recommend you guys, if you haven't watched the previous episodes of this course, just go into my YouTube channel or into the new media channel as well, and you will be able to see the previous recordings. Now, in that way, you can catch up and start from the very beginning. So here, as you can see, the website that I'm showing there, my website, you will be able to find the course that I'm talking about. I will be posting way more courses, but here are the two main classes that we already went through. So we went through how to set up our collaboration using and how to use GitHub as our main repository, and then we installed something called Git Kraken. After that, we started looking into how to download Unity using the Unity Hub, creating our first project and understanding how to set up Unity with Git. Then we were able to set up our project in our repository in GitHub and clone it into our Git Kraken. Then we started doing a full analysis of like the main basic tools that we can use on the Unity editor and like the windows and some of the tabs, which of course I will have to talk for hours to be able to cover a lot of the tools that Unity has, but we were able to cover some of the basics so you can move around. Before I start with today's session, I want you guys to fix a little issue that I found on the git ignore that we created last time, like here in this step. So remember that I was telling you that the git ignore, it's a file that tells Git what to track and what not to track. So basically, what to ignore from your files. We are using this page, which for the most part is pretty reliable, but sometimes it gives you some trouble. And that's why today I want to make sure, guys, that you see what's the problem here and like we can go and fix it right away. So I want to go into our project. So let's go everybody to our Unity Basics. That's the project that we were working last time. If you don't have it as well, I have the GitHub repository public, so you guys can just clone it, so you can pretty much follow along what I'm doing. But if we go here and we also open our Git Kraken, if we see here, when we added our git ignore and then we added our project, we missed that it only added the assets and the project settings. But I told you guys that the packages folder was also pretty important to have. So we require this in order for Unity to be able to recreate the packages that we are importing. So other developers, when they pull the code, they are able to reproduce it. At this moment, when you go to this package folder, you will see there's only a manifest. Basically, that manifest, what it's telling us is that which are the packages and which version we should download when the project is open and they don't exist. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna open our git ignore. For some reason, like it's not tracking, so an easy way to look for that is we're gonna go and Control F to find in our file just this word. It's basically the package without the P, because the rules in the git ignore most of the time are either similar to this li library, which is basically to cover both the capital L and the lowercase l. So the same for the packages. So we are gonna go here, we see unit packages, that's fine, but then here we got into the nugget packages. So this is something that, yeah, it should not be tracked for the nugget packages, but for Unity is taking it as well. It's like saying, oh, I found that you are having packages not being tracked, which is not good for us. So what we're gonna do here, just a quick fix, is we are gonna add this. So we don't want we want Unity Git to track. So as soon as I do that and I hit save, Git here is gonna tell me like, yeah, you made a change in the git ignore here, and that made a change making the manifest being able to be committed. So I'm just gonna go ahead and save here, and we can put both together. Fix.git ignore not tracking packages folder. We will commit this. So this is not like that common that happens, but sometimes it can happen. And you as a developer, the idea is that you keep an eye on these little problems that may happen, that may appear. Sometimes it will, like, you will be able to find out when another developer downloads the project and it looks broken, like maybe they have missing references, some packages are not there, and that's the reason. But sometimes it's different reasons. And that might be because you have a git ignore that is not well configured. All right, now that we already fixed that, and I already pushed, we have the fix. Now we are tracking our packages folder. So whatever package we import into our project will be tracked now, which is great. So now let's go ahead and start with our Unity project. So as we said last time, we are using the hub, the Unity hub, to manage our projects and our versions. So if we go to the projects, we will be able here to find the projects that we are using. So the Unity basics. We are gonna go ahead and click it. I already did, so we don't waste time looking into how it takes time to reload things and reopen things. So we have here our project. We cover most of the windows that you see here last time, and you will see that most of the projects on Unity will look pretty much like this one when you open them, like a 2D project. You only have a scenes folder with the sample scene that is basically this scene that you have here without pretty much anything. So I'm gonna start ahead and creating some of the folders that I often use, just so it's a little bit more organized and we know where are things. Because remember that from this window, the project window, is where we can drag basically everything that will go into our project, like into our hierarchy or into our scene. So in order for us to be able to get what we need, it's good to have a good organization, like folder structure. If we don't do that, then we will end up having like a lot of missing assets that we don't know where they are, or maybe we have duplicates, which is not great, but it's a good practice. So everything that we created, as we said last time, it will be under our assets folder, and all of our scenes will be in our scenes folder. Some people will change the name of this and they will put like this, just so that folder will always remain on top. And it's easy to, like, when you need to change between scenes, like the folder is always on top. But in my case, it doesn't really bother me to go on and look for the scenes that is always like around here, or like down here, because it's ordered alphabetically. So it's fine, but like you can do that little trick, it might help you. Okay, so aside from our scenes, there are a couple of things that we will require in our project and are pretty common. So in a 2D project, for example, we are gonna require another folder, which is gonna be called sprites. Okay. this folder will have every single sprite that we import in our project. So we know that like everything is in here, we can drag it and drop it from here. Another very common, like this is for every single project. You will probably won't see a project that doesn't have this folder, and it's called scripts, which will hold all the scripts that we create in our project. Scripts is important to have them there because of organization basically as well. But when you get into a more advanced point, then you will need to have your scripts in a specific folder if you start doing like assembly references or things like that. I'm not gonna talk much about it because that's a little bit too in depth and I will probably confuse you guys. Okay, so now that we have that folder, we will also require a very important one that it's mainly for you. Like if you see here, since you can relate to a different like development project as like your front end basically. This is what you are gonna show. That this is where you have kind of like your views or something like this. The scripts, well, it's pretty self-explanatory, and your sprites is like the assets, like the 2D assets that you have in your project. But this specific folder that I'm gonna create, which is called prefabs, this folder it's mainly created here in Unity, and we are gonna go later on and explain what's a prefab in Unity. But prefabs are very, very powerful. They have existed quite a long time ago, but I remember a time when the prefabs will only track like the base object, and I always wish to have like nested prefabs. If someone knows about Unity, they will know what I'm talking about. But nested prefabs were launched in Unity a couple of years ago, and it was a great addition. But we will not be using them too much here because there's not too much point like on these kind of projects. But it was worth mentioning. All right, now that we have those folders, I think I'm gonna create a couple of more that are pretty important. So another folder, it's the materials, and since we are not actually using like 3D objects in this specific project, we don't need textures. But often when you see projects like there are 3D projects, you will see that the materials folder is called materials and textures because it holds the materials plus the textures that you require. We won't use them today or like in this session, so I'm just gonna leave it as materials. I'm going to create another one which I really like, and is the animations. This one will have all the animations for our player, for our enemies, for maybe something in the game that also moves. Whatever animation we create, we are gonna keep it in here, unless it's of course like animation made by a script. That will be just a simple script or maybe a prefab. Okay, I think I'm not missing anything else. Those are like the core ones that we're gonna be using. Those are the folders that we require. All right, so now that we have that there and we understand how our structure is, let's go ahead and go here into our course material. I have prepared here these 3 folders that will let us build basically the game we said we were gonna create. So just if we wanna go and see it again one last time, I'm gonna show you guys what I am talking about. Like we have 3 different packages that will have different assets that we will require. The first one, which we're gonna import shortly, is the one that holds like the background and all of these tiles and these assets like the tree, the bush, and this kind of the things. So let's go ahead and do that. How do you import a package into Unity? That's actually very intuitive and very easy to do. So you just have to go into your package, like into your folder. I'm gonna just open it, And I just need the PNGs, objects and tiles. That's basically, here we have everything we need, right? And the tiles and the background we were just talking about. Okay, so I'm just gonna grab these objects and I'm just gonna drag them here. I know, like I could drag them under this folder, or because I have it selected, I can just drop them here. Now Unity is gonna start compiling those objects. Basically, it's also creating the meta files that we have always discussed that Unity has. So as you can see, every time that I created a folder, Unity created a meta file for myself. And if I go into my sprites, the same thing happened. Now, now that we have that, remember we always want to go into our project, and what we want to do is to always commit our things. So, for example, in this case, I won't be committing the folders unless I use them. So in this case, for example, the sprites, this is the sprite meta file plus the sprites. So I'm gonna go ahead. Actually, I just want to make it a little bit more organized, and you can do this, like you can organize this as however as you like, but I want to create a folder here which is called environment, which this one will have basically the environment for our, like, all of our game. I'm gonna just go ahead and drag this and put it inside. This is how you move things around. Like here, if you just notice, it's pretty easy. You just drag and drop things and that will change here. Okay, so now we have that. So basically what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna stage this folder, which will stage the sprites, and I'm gonna say add sprites folder with environment assets, right? Another thing to notice, if you have pay attention a little bit, when I am doing my commits, I say initial commit, add, git ignore, update, readme, add, fix, add. I didn't say added sprites or fixed git ignore, updated git ignore, the readme or whatever. And that's just a convention that is used on Git, that you use it this way, because when then you do, for example, a pull request or a merge request, then how basically the computer will read it for you is like this commit or this merge request will fix your git ignore, will add the sprites. So it's in like a present, it's not a past tense, because it will be weird. Like this merge will added your sprites, that will be weird. Okay, so just make sure that you are adding your things with your comments and your specific details. So we have the history and we know, oh, here I added my sprites. That's when I did something wrong or something, right? Okay, so now that we have that, I'm just gonna go ahead and see. Unity provides us with some like import settings for our sprites. So here we have a bunch of stuff which is pretty important to know about. Not that in depth, but I will tell you as we use some of them down the road. The type of texture is pretty important because that sometimes you will just get like a default and you won't be able to use it as a sprite, so you have to change it to a sprite. And sometimes you have a sprite that has multiple images. For example, you get the animations of a player, all of them in the same sprite sheet, basically, like in the same image. You can go ahead and say that it's a multiple, and then you can use the sprite editor to change it. Maybe and in the future, in one of the next sessions, I will add just like a quick example so I can show you how to use the sprite editor, which is pretty cool and it's pretty good and very useful. For this case, we don't have any of that. As we can see here, all of our sprites are already broken into nice like tiles, and that's very convenient for us. We don't need to go and do that sprite editor, but it's good to know that it's there. Okay, another thing that I want to show you guys that we are gonna be using, and if we go here, is our pixels per unit. So this is basically how many pixels per unit on our on our sprite it will consume in the screen basically. So in this moment, this sprite is pixels per unit and of 100. So I'm just gonna go ahead and show you quickly. This is a quick test. I'm gonna put this here. You see, that's a way to just drag and drop. We're not gonna do it that way, but that's a way. Just a quick explanation of what happened there is Unity created a Unity object, right? Like a game object, this one. It changed the name to the same name as our sprite, arrow sign. It has the transform as we discussed last time. And it added a component called a sprite renderer because we need a sprite renderer to be able to render our sprites. And it got and it added our sprite into this box. So if I go ahead and change this, it will just change our thing. Notice that it's not changing the name, it's just changing what is being rendered. So this component is kind of like independent of this game object in a way, like it's not connected to the name or the transform right now. And I can change some things like the color, I can flip it. So if I flip, you can see it's flipped. We are gonna use this a lot. And it has like a sprite default material. This is the material that we will use for most of our sprites here in this game. Okay, we are not gonna cover this one, we will do it later, but what I wanted to show you is the pixels per unit. So if I go ahead and say I need 50 pixels per unit and I hit apply, you saw that like my object just increased. So now it looks bigger because it's covering more space, right? Like I needed less to cover that unit. So I just want to make that happen to all of these ones because they are not as important here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and say 50 for all of these ones, and I'm gonna change it. And I wanna do the same for all of our tiles. 50 and apply. It's gonna take a little bit more time just because I have more objects. Okay, awesome. I'm gonna delete this guy. Cool. Okay, now that we have our environment and we have our background, it's time to start creating our scene, which is the fun part, right? So creating scenes, like in game development, it's an entire process. Like it's not just dragging and dropping, but in this case we're gonna do it. But most of the times when you're building a game, how I encourage you guys to do it is to first, like on paper, draw how is gonna be the layout of your level, because you need to know like how many, like you see this is divided like with a gray. That has a reason, and it's because we have positioning, and we know we will be able to know like, okay, my player, I want him to jump two of these boxes, right? 2 units. If the player jumps 2 units, I know that my tiles cannot be higher up than 2 units between one jump and another, because then my player won't be able to jump. And it might not be because that's the idea, like, oh no, I don't want the player to be able to jump there. It's just because I did a miscalculation, and it will look like your game is just broken. So when you are start doing this, go ahead and make your paper version. Do it like in a grid like this, so you have your metrics. For now, we're just gonna try to match it. This is often how it's done when you are doing like game jams, where you are not able to go ahead and do like the pre-planning session and the game design of your game. You just go ahead and start working on it, and then just play it. And if you have to alter something, you will go and do it. Unity is so powerful that it will let us do that without any problem. Okay, so we want to create a game object here. You will often see that I create game objects that are basically empty and are just like containers for organization. So I want to say this is my environment. It's my environment container. So all the objects that I create, because I will have tons of objects, like you will see, this will come become like huge. I don't want them to be here and then I won't be able to find my player or something. So I will just put them here so I can like collapse that structure. So I'm gonna go ahead and create another one, and it's gonna be called background. And as I said, okay, so as you see here, I moved something in my scene, so now my objects are not being created in the center, which I don't really like too much. So here we are in the position we wanted. There you go. And I'm gonna put it here. Another thing to notice when we start doing the child thing is where our like global position or our local position will matter. If I move this guy, so if I go ahead here and I move this guy here, you will see my child is still on 0, 0. But if I take it out of the parent, it has the same position because that's the global position. Like we both, because I was on 0, 0, that was my global position. But under the child, my local position will be 0, 0, 0. Okay, so let's go back here. So you can press Ctrl Z every time that you want to go back. Okay, on our background, we want to have our background sprite, right? Because we want to show that in our camera. So you might think like, okay, I'm just gonna drag and drop it here. That won't work because I'm trying to drag and drop a sprite where I only can have components. So that won't work. If I put it here, Unity is great on those things. It will just create a child with the sprite, but we don't want that. Like we don't want to be environment, background, and background. There are two options. Like you can either just create this and have this as your environment and just change this to the same name we had here, right? Like that. So we have it right there. Or the other option is we have this, what we created before. We go ahead and find that little thing. If you don't know about it, you can just type here and you will be able to start searching. So sprite. So I say, oh, here, look, sprite renderer. So that's the one that I want to use. I need to put this here, and now we have our nice background. We're gonna leave it there because I want to show you something, guys, and it's our when we start adding our tiles. So I'm not gonna do any changes. Like this is just an image there, but you will see why I need to do some changes later. I'm gonna start creating now. I'm gonna create another object. This is gonna be called platform, and it's just another container. And I am going to create, I need this tile, which is basically the middle tile, and I'm gonna put it here. Okay, so as you can see now, my tile doesn't appear in my game, right? Like you will think maybe, oh, something is going on, something is happening, this is not correct, like it should appear there. Well, what is happening is that it's basically clipping. Like if you are able to see here, well, it's hard to see because these are like they don't have depth, but basically they are one on top of the other one, and they are not being able to render properly. So it is there, but we can't see it. What we need to do to fix this is give like an order of positioning in the layers, right? So in order to do that, what we are gonna do is we are gonna go into our background, and we have here the sorting layers, right? The sorting layers plus the order layers is something very good to use with the sprites. This will let us define some layers for certain things. So I'm gonna go and create more. So if you just missed that, I have here default. I can go in add sorting layers, and I can click this little plus button, and I'm gonna say background. So I have my background layer. I'm gonna create another one. I'm gonna say tiles. So I have these two layers, and depending on the order that I have them here, like I can move this here, they will appear in my game. So I need to change this to background, and my tile, I will change it to tiles. And now my tile just appeared. Simple as that. Right? Okay, so we have our tile there. It's nice, it's working. Now we can start creating our platform. So basically the platform is where our player will stand up. And we're gonna just try to match the same level that we have on here, just for the sake of this tutorial. So if we look, we have here our tile. That's exactly the same one that I just added. We just need the other corner and the other corner. So I'm gonna leave it here. I could change this to tile top middle or whatever, but this name doesn't really matter at this point. As long as you know what it is, it's gonna be fine. So I have it here. I'm gonna look for the left corner one. I want to put this one here, and I'm gonna look for my right one. Okay, so Unity has something great, which is I can move objects. Sorry, if I want to see this too, I need to change them to tiles, right? So if I move it, I now can see it. So we're gonna say this guy is our top left, and this guy is our top right. Okay, so if these tiles were of like a 1 unit value, similar, I'm gonna just show you here. I'm gonna go ahead and create a quad. So I have that quad there, if you see it. Let me just hide this guy. I can, first of all, click Ctrl D to duplicate it. And if I hold Ctrl and I move this guy, it will move exactly 1 unit to the direction that I'm holding it. So I'm able to easily stack tiles exactly where I need them, right? That's pretty good to have. And if we were like using exactly a 1 unit tile, but then if you see here, this one is not even like 2 units. It's like two and a little bit, like 2.5 probably. So unfortunately, that little trick won't work. Like you see, I have that gap in the middle. So one way to fix it will be to have the tiles being exactly 2 by 2, for example. Or we can just go ahead and do it manually, which sometimes is the case. And I'm just gonna do it here. And it's perfectly aligned. Once you have that number, let's see if I do 2.6. No, I need it to be exactly the same as before. So minus 2.559. I can copy that and I can go to my right tile, and we just noticed that that wasn't the right tile. Unfortunately, it looks like uh, that was like the left one, right? Probably. Yes, looks like was not the correct tile. This one was the middle one. Oh, sorry, I was the one that did the mistake. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put this in 0, left here. Yeah, that was right. And I can put this one on here and just remove the minus, and we have our perfect platform there. This nice package has 3 more tiles that we can add. And we can say, I want all of these 3, put them here. Oh, sorry. I need to do one by one here, another one here, and another one here. If I'm not wrong, I did left. This one will be bot left, bot for bottom, and bot middle, and bot right. Okay. And now we just have to match our middle one down. So, oh, you know what happened there is our sorting layer. You just have to put it in the right one, and now we can see our tiles. Okay, so it looks like I just have to move it here to match it perfectly. Cool. Okay, so that should do it. Oh, it looks like there's a little gap. If it overlaps a little bit, it's okay. It's not a big deal. Okay, so now we can use the same position for the y-axis. Remember, this is all like in a grid, and we can just change those. And then we know how much is for the left, so we can add the same value, and we know that the right will be the same but positive. There you go. We have a nice platform. Okay, so this platform looks pretty nice, right? Another benefit of putting them into this container is that now that I have my little container there, I can move the entire platform using just the parent, which is great. So I am going to put this down here, right here, and I believe what it's going on and why it doesn't look similar to our game. Like you can see here, this platform, if we put it exactly as it is in our game, like you see this little white line is our camera. If I put it like this, it won't match our game here. Like this platform looks way smaller. That's just because of how this is being rendered. And as well, how the camera is looking for it. So the camera has a nice parameter here, which is kind of like the our field of view, and we can increase it or reduce it depending on how much we want to see in one glance. So for this game, we're just gonna put it like we're gonna increase it, something like that in theory. That might be too much, right? Mm, yeah, so we will have a problem here, and is that if we have it like this, our game will look like like we can see that blue background, right? And we don't want that. Like that will look weird in our game. So one way to quickly fix it is just increasing our background. As long as we keep the same proportion, it will look fine. Okay, so we have our nice background. Now we can move this down here. And if we check it out in our nice project, it looks pretty much the same, right? Yeah, same size. That's good. That's good enough. And yeah, that's pretty much a good size. Let's see. Yeah, here we can see the extra space that we'll have on our final game. Okay, so now that we have our platform, we can add like those little details. That's just like a nice detail to have there. So we're gonna put this in here. As you see here, this platform was moved, but this guy was placed like to offset that change in the position 0. So we have to set this to tiles, and we wanna move this guy to the position 0, 0, 0. So you saw now that our tile now our tile is not working basically. That's because it doesn't know what to render first, right? That's our problem there. One way to fix it will be, you will might think, okay, let's create another sorting layer. But this is actually not like another sorting layer, right? This is part of my tiles. It's just a little detail that I want to add. I don't want to create a new layer just for that little thing. So what I can do is the ordering layer. So if I go ahead and say this is 10, now it's up. So the higher the number, the closer it will look in the screen. So it will be on top. So we have our little skeleton there. It's cool. Yeah, that matches there. Great. Now we have our nice tile that looks pretty much the same. But now this tile is just a piece of object. Like it doesn't work for our player. Like when our player when we put our player, it won't know that it's a platform. Like there's no way that he knows that this is something that exists in the game. It will be just another image in the game. So we are gonna start covering something that is very important in Unity and is like a huge thing that you will always use, and that's colliders. So a collider basically is a shape that we create that Unity tracks, and it's able to track the collisions between colliders. So you can collide two colliders, and in that way we will know that something is here. So I can go here and say, let's go and look for here in our search. I want to look for collider. So the colliders will show me all the types of colliders that Unity has. There are 2D and 3D colliders. Make sure that because we are in a 2D game, we are using 2D colliders. So for this case, basically what we want to do is select the shape that fits the best the object that we want to have collisions with. So in this case, because this is basically a square, I'm just going to go ahead and create a box collider. So you see that little green thing there? That's magic. Like that's going to check for the collisions in our game. But that's pretty small. So there's two ways of changing the size of this. You can go here in the size and start increasing this and increasing this to match it, right? And with the offset, but that's a little bit tedious, right? There's a nice edit collider here that will enter in the edition mode of that collider, and I can just drag basically this here. I want to match it as much as I can because that's the most important piece. And the back, like the down part, it doesn't really matter too much, but just so our player doesn't like go through, we can just add it there. I want to have it here, put it over here a little bit. That's perfect. Okay. So I have my collider there and it's colliding perfectly. Colliders have like the type of collider, like a box collider. I can have a sphere, I could have a cylinder or whatever, or I can even have a polygon, which is basically create a structure, a complex structure with different points, which will be not great for performance, but great for if we need like actual precision on the collisions. Then if we need to the material, I'm gonna explore that later, and the trigger is pretty important and we also gonna use it later. For now, let's just forget about all the other properties. We will cover them as we use them. Okay, now that we have that in our platform, that platform is actually ready to be used. Okay, so this platform is perfect. When we have something like that in Unity that we know, okay, that platform is gonna be probably used in multiple areas, right? Probably not because of the little like detail, but most of the time it will be, right? So on this case, what we could do is we can leave that thing outside, right? It's part of our platform, but it's not really. And that platform, we are just gonna drag and drop it in our prefabs folder. That basically just created our prefab. So our prefab, which is great, right, has been created with the same structure. Prefab is basically just like the instance, like a saved version of what I created here. That's why it's blue. Like when it's blue is because it's my prefab. I can put this back here and you can see here there's like a plus. It's not part of my prefab. I can move it, and it's still, oh, sorry, I can move the platform, and it's still part of it, but it's not being added to my prefab. Now I am going to drop another prefab. So that's the magic of the prefabs, is I can just like instantiate another one. You can see now I have my other platform. Instead of having to recreate it completely, I just created another platform. I'm gonna put this into the, oh sorry, I did a mistake there. We are going to roll back this. We're gonna put this back 0 0, right? Because we don't want that to be moved like that. We want to put it into our environment, so it's 0 0 0, and then we want to move it. That will be nicer to, so I just wanted to show you the right way to do it. Then when we add another platform and we put it in here, there you go, and I want to move it down here, so this one should be exactly on the corner, and this one we are gonna move it a little bit down here, right, just to match our game. Yeah, it's about right. That doesn't have to be perfect, but we have it there. So that's the magic of prefabs. Let's go into our thing. Now we have too much changes, so we gotta commit what we have changed one by one, basically, or like a bunch at a time, but that we know that we made the change. So we know in the sprites we did the change of changing the pixels per unit. So we can stage that, and we can say change pixels per unit to 50 on tiles and objects. And we can, let me check that, yeah, and I can commit that. Then we created our prefab, our platform, but just in case, I want to add this first one. This is the sorting layers, which is handled by the tag manager, and we will see this often in this game. But basically, our tag manager has added the background and the tile, so I'm gonna add this too. Added sorting layers for background and tiles. There. And now I can save my prefabs. So I want to stage the prefabs with the prefabs now because it's the first time I am adding this folder. Add, sorry, for example, I did an error here. Added, it should have been add platform prefab. And then we need to also commit our sample scene. Update sample scene with environment. There you go. And we have our changes there. We can push that. We will pull first to check that no one else has any of these changes to avoid merge conflicts, but because I'm the only one right now, I can just push without fear. Okay, so how's everything going, guys? Remember, if you have any questions at all, just post them in the channel, in the chat, and I will be glad to answer you right away. Okay, so now that we have done that, we have pushed everything into for our platform, we can go ahead and create just another one to see the process. We can check, sorry, we can create this one, right? Just to have that one there too. Okay, so we want to go here, and we're gonna create, let's do 0, and this one is gonna be called floating platform. We're gonna put it in the environment here, and we are gonna drag from our tiles the floating pieces, which basically are just these three. So that one will be easy. So this is one, this is two, and this is three, right? So tile center, this one was, oh sorry, this one was center or middle. This one is actually left, and this one is right. Okay, and we need to change our sorting layer so we are able to see them to tiles. We will move. Oh, nice. We have someone there in our chat. Thank you for the comment. And we will move this a little bit just to match it here. There you go. And we have the same here and put it into the other one. But negative. Awesome. Okay, so we have that there. We have our platform. We just created that way. We can go ahead and yeah, everything looks right? Okay. We can put it in our prefabs because we have our floating platform there. And we are going to move that just a little bit because our player won't be able to jump that high. There you go. We probably went somewhere around here so it's easier. Yeah, cool. Okay, so we have our platforms. Awesome. Now we can move. Well, there's something wrong with this platform and you can notice our player will fall, but I'm just gonna leave it right there so we can later show like the importance of having our colliders like those ones, but that's fine. Okay, now let's go ahead and start creating our player. So we will go into our into the content course content, and then we will go to our free night and we will go to our PNG, and we have here all of our player. Basically, this is what I was telling you, like this could have been in the same page, just one file, and then I would have been able to cut it using the sprite editor that Unity has. But for the sake of this one, is already cut and I have all my sprites. And you can see is basically that's how our animation will work. Is basically changing one sprite after another to have like that nice effect of the paper when you draw it in like the corner of a paper. That's awesome. Okay, so let's go into our sprites, create another folder. We will call our player. And under our player folder, we are gonna just drag and drop all of those guys. That's gonna take a little bit longer because it's way more images that we are importing into Unity. And with the player, we are gonna just move a little bit faster. I already explained some of the things we have, but basically we have to change the units, the pixels per unit, because if I just move this guy here, just a quick thing, we're gonna add another sorting layer. We're gonna call it player. We are going to add our player there. Our player looks gigantic, right? So what we want to do is change this to 200 and apply, and that looks about right. So we are gonna go ahead and do the same for all of these guys and hit apply. That's gonna also take a little bit of time because it has to change all of those, which is a pretty big task and needs to be done by Unity. Okay, now that we have that, we have covered how to import our assets, how to make our environment. You guys now are able to go ahead and create like all kinds of levels. You can be crazy and start creating different platforms and jumping up and down and maybe a cavern and then there's a fall and you have to move. That's great. Like it's for you to do whatever you want. There's way more tiles here that you can use with different shapes, so it's pretty nice, and you can add a lot of different objects just to make it look nicer. Um, if you guys do that, please send me the link of your GitHub repo, and I will be glad to check it out or like post some screenshots of what you have done. I will really love to see what you have created. Just a little tip, don't make it too big, too huge, because depending on the platform you are gonna be running this, you will probably have to have different sizes of levels. Like if you are running this on a mobile device and you want it to be run like in a small, like not very powerful devices, you will need like short levels, or otherwise like all the content will make it too slow and like it will crash, it will run out of memory. So just be careful with that. Okay, we're gonna remove this. That's why I'm telling you, like the back, like our environment will be just collapsed. That's great. And now we can start creating our player. For our player, we are gonna create another empty game object, position it on 0, 0, 0, and we're gonna call it our player. Inside of it, right, we are going to have, I believe we can just create it from here. Let me just check. Yeah, right away we are gonna say the player. We can call it player controller, just, or player controller. It doesn't really matter. We are gonna add a sprite renderer, and we can add here as our main sprite the idle number 1. We have to change this to the player, and we have our player there. So this is our player coming into life right away. I'm gonna start talking about animations, so we can set our player with animations. So we're gonna go into our folder of animations. Or before that, let's push all those changes, because we added just quite a bit of changes. So in our sprites, we know we did all of this. We are gonna add all of those. It's gonna take a little bit of time. Add player sprites with correct pixel per unit. Commit. And we also wanna add our floating platform. Add floating platform prefab and update our scene. Update sample scene. All right. Now that we have that, we can push, and we will go back here. In our animations, I'm gonna start talking about how those animations work. So Unity has 2 new windows that we didn't cover last time, but they were present here. Maybe some of you saw them and you were wondering like, oh, okay, what's all of like what those tabs do. Those tabs will control all of the play, or like the animations of an object. Unity has these that some will differ and say that's not very powerful, I don't like it, but I really love it. Like what I can do with these animations here, it's amazing. How animations works is there's an animator controller plus some animation clips, basically these ones. So the clips is basically where we host all of our like the animation itself. If it was, for example, a 3D model, here we will have like the movement of the joints of our bones and things of our game object, and that's our animation. In this case, because we are doing sprite animations, like sprites animation is basically changing, the animation will be just replacing basically the sprite here with the next sprite that we require. So you see here idle 1, then it's idle 2, idle 3, idle 4. That's basically what the animation will do. Like in after some seconds, it will start like changing it so it looks nice, the animation of the player, right? So let's go ahead and create our first animation. So I'm gonna create here a folder called player, right? And I'm gonna create, this is one way of creating it, animation, and it's gonna be called idle. You see here I have my idle animation. The only thing that I have to do, like I could go like frame by frame and add them, but with the sprites it's pretty easy. I can just go and find my idle sprites, and I see there's 10 of them. Drag and drop them. Oh, sorry. There is one that it's not. Oh, sorry, I grabbed something that it was not right. Okay, why? Let me check if I just made a mistake. Probably. Oh, I know why it is. Okay, that was a little bit. That was the wrong way of doing it for the sprites. For the sprites, it requires to know where is the renderer to be able to put it that way. So what we will do is I'm gonna cover first the controllers. So let's go and create our controllers folder. Basically, the controller is just gonna tell us what to do and when to do it, like when to change an animation and like the behavior of the animations. So we're gonna call player controller. That will create it there. And in our player, we need an animator, and we are gonna drag and drop our controller. Now that we have it here, like it knows that our player has an animation, has an animator, and like this object has a sprite renderer. So we can create a new clip in our animations player, and we can call it idle. There you go. Now, if I'm not wrong, sorry about that, I can come here and drag and drop. There you go. That's beautiful. Now I have my sprites as the idle animation. You see they are like too close one to each other. So if I just hit play, I will see like my player is so exhausted. Like the idle looks like if he just finished like the marathon. So one way of doing it will be to just grab each one of these keyframes basically and move them uh, farther apart from each other. But that will be a little bit of a task, right? So that's why we have this here. That's also a good, and we can just change and say 10, for example. That's a nice number. And now if I hit play, that looks like an idle. Like our guy is just there, like kind of breathing, breathing. So that's awesome. Okay, let's go ahead and create some other animations. We can go create a clip, and we will call this jump. Let's go and look for our jump animations. There you go, 10 sprites, right? And this one we also require to be 10. And there you go, that's our nice jump. As you can see, like he's jumping, like he's doing the animation of jumping, but he's not like moving. There's two type of animations in Unity. Ones that are like in place, like this one, like he is jumping in place, and other ones that actually move the animation, like the frames, the position of the character is moved up, or if he's walking is moved. But if we do that, we need to tell Unity like, okay, the animation itself is the one that will handle the movement of the object. Or in this case, we are just using this as an animation, but the real movement of the character will be handled by a script. Okay, now we can create another one, which is pretty important, which is called walk. And let's go ahead and search our walk animation. We have run and we have walk. Okay. All right, and for our walk, yes. Okay, so our walk, it works with the 10 frames as well. There you go. Our little guy is walking. That's awesome. Now, if we go here into our animator, we see these little boxes were created. So the animator, as we said before, is what it handles, like what happens with those animations. So right now, when my animator starts, my idle animation will be played. So if I hit save and I hit play, our player will go directly to the idle mode and it will be just in idle. There you go. Our player is in idle. Yeah, if I go here, here is the idle. One important thing to notice is my idle animation is set to loop because like the idle is looping, and that's great. Unity does that for us as a default. Some of the animations doesn't need to be looping because like they are not meant to be looping. Okay, that's great. We have that. We need to create another last animation just in case. You can see here I'm not able to click it. That's because I'm not selecting the player. I can create another one and it's gonna be called attack. And for the attack, I'm going to select my attack animation. There you go. And hit. Oh, yeah. The guy is on fire. Okay, for our attack, if we do the same 10, it's probably gonna be too slow, right? We can increase it a little bit. There you go. It looks like, yeah, more rage. Okay, we have all of our animations here, but right now we are not gonna move them around because we need some scripts to know like what are we going to do with those animations or like how we are gonna react, right? All right, we have our player there. Let's go ahead and save. We most likely will like to have also our player as a prefab because it's the main player. He most likely will be used in different scenes unless we do like a trick when we move between scenes and our player remains the same, but that's not gonna be the case here. Okay, save. We go back here and we can um, add our changes. So we will need first the animations. So let's go ahead and yeah, we know we did all of this, right? All of that was added. So create this with this guy and we will say add animation animator controller and idle and animations for player. In the description I can say add idle walk jump and attack animations, right? That's it. And we can add our player prefab. Let's do first our tag manager. Add player sorting layer. Add that, and now we can do add player prefab with sprites and animations. add player prefab. Basically, that's what we did. And we can hit that and we can push. Cool. This is just so we always keep our changes saved and also in our remote repository in case something happened with my computer or I go into a friend's house and I wanna like keep working on my project, I can just pull my project and I will have everything. Okay, so now that we have our player, we have covered pretty much what we require from the sprites. Now we're gonna dive into what is more exciting about like development. Well, no, it's just a little bit biased because I'm a programmer and I really like and enjoy making code. But I also love doing this. Like, don't get me wrong, I love setting up the scenes. I love the game design side of the job, and as well the animations. I'm crazy for animations. If I when I have more time, I will try to also do more animations, like in Maya or things like that. I will love to do that. Okay, let's go back. I don't want to derail too much. We will start doing our first scripts. But before that, our player needs a nice collider, right? Because if our player doesn't have a collider, then it won't be able to collide with things. If we see our player here, there you go. That's much better. We have our player. Like we could go and create a custom shape that matches pretty much how our player it is, but we have two troubles here. First is it's just a sprite that is changing. Like it doesn't like Unity doesn't really have access to how is like the sword moving or anything because it's just a sprite. It's just an image. If we had this as a separate game object, which is another way to make 2D games, it's like you have the arm separated from the other arm and the chest, and then you assemble them here, and then you create animations in Unity. You can do that. Then you are able to track the movement, like the separate movement of the arm. But because it's sprites, we can't. So the closest shape that we can see is just a box collider, right? And that's pretty big. We can just go ahead and resize that here. Yeah, it doesn't look nice because I have that white background, so it's hard to tell, but that's good. And here, and for the top part, we don't want to drag the little piece. There you go. Awesome. Okay, so one little trick. Right now, I added a change to my prefab, but it's not gonna affect my player here. So if I instantiate that player won't have that collider. And you can notice that there's a blue line here. It means that it was added to my prefab, but it's not committed, like it's not applied to the changes on my prefab. If I want to apply it, I have to go into override and I see, oh, there was a box collider that was added. Yeah, I did that and I want that to be part of the prefab. Apply. And now I got rid of that blue line and my player has the, the collider now. Okay, now we have our player. Let's go into the scripts. So let's go here. The first script we are gonna create, one of the biggest ones that this game will have, and like one of the important ones, is gonna be our player controller. You can call it however you want, but that's just so we know what it is, right? Okay, so we are opening our nice Visual Studio. Mm, as we talked before, if you non-commercial, you can use it the community version. This is just like for personal projects, or if you are in a company, then you will have to get a license. But I offer some alternatives before when we talk about things like Visual Studio Code, which is pretty similar and it's a free version. It's an open source one. Okay, we have our code here. And as you can see, Unity has created for us already like a template for our first code. I want to go through this a little bit more detail because I believe like coding is something that maybe not all of you guys are very familiarized, or even if you are and you don't know Unity, it could be a little bit like weird because it has some special things that like are Unity only basically. So it will be nice if we check it out, right? Like if we go one by one and look at it. First of all, I'm gonna explain how like Unity, like how the code here works and how Unity works. It's basically Unity will go into our script and it will run, like it will read the lines that exist in their code. But how does Unity know what to read? Like, because I can make it to start like from the bottom and then go up and then go down. So there is like a defined order for things to happen in Unity, and I want to cover that with you guys in here. So first of all, Unity documentation is the best place you can go when you need to find something about Unity that you don't know or you want to know how to use it. It's a huge manual that tells you everything you need to know. Of course, some things like more custom, you will have to do it by yourself or like find it elsewhere. But pretty much all the standard things from Unity are covered in the documentation. So here I am in the order of executions for event functions. This looks a little bit huge and convoluted, but I'm just gonna talk about what like the I'm gonna just break it into the basics that what we need to use. But as you can see here, the like Unity runs in a defined structure, right? And there are some events that happens in some points of time. So what we need to know here is like every script, if it has an awake method. So if I go to Unity, I can create here awake, and it will know what I'm talking about. This will be the first method that it will be run if this script exists in my scene, of course. If it exists in my scene, it will go here and it will read whatever I type here. And then if we look at here, there's the onEnable. This might be useful in this course. This is basically when our object gets enabled. Like the awake is just when the object is awakened, but maybe the object is not enabled from the beginning. So then the next call will be onEnable. We don't want to talk about the reset right now. Then the start, that's the one that we're looking here. So the start is called before the first frame of date. So whatever we want to initialize, we can add it here in our start. Then we have our physics. We are not going to dive too much into it, just a bit. But basically, the fix update, it's a code, like it's a place that Unity, like as you can see here, there's like an iteration. It means like the awake and all of these ones will run just once, like at the very first time, right? But then the fix update will happen, as the name says, like every fixed frames, once per frame, if the fixed time step is less than the actual frame of date time. So basically, an easy way to explain it is every frame in our game, so like a frame could be somehow around like a quarter of a second. In the fix update, we can set up the time, but basically it's fixed. Like it doesn't depend on your machine and your fix or your frame rate, but it will happen consistently. That's why the physics are used there. Then if we move on, we will see, like, don't take care about all of these things. maybe the on trigger. This is pretty important. It's basically everything that happens with our collisions. It will be tracked here, happening in this same loop. So that's pretty important to notice. Then we can go into our update. Our update is basically is similar to this fix update, but it's just update. So this will change, like it will happen once per frame, but according to your frame rate, basically. Then we have a later update, which happens after all of this, but we are not gonna use it right now. And then we have here a bunch of other methods that we don't really care. Then we have on application quit that doesn't work on all platforms. Then we have the on disable, which is the opposite of the on enable, which is pretty useful, and the on destroy. So when the object is destroyed, we can still do something with the object, which is pretty cool. Okay, now that we know the structure and the order of operation, we can go back. We can just do a quick, nice test of the ones we are gonna use. So we're gonna say awake, start, update. That's pretty much the most important ones right now. And I'm gonna say here debug.log. So for those ones that know a little bit of programming, you will be a little bit familiar with like printing some messages into your console. For example, every time that you start on a new languages, or like you started with your first time programming, the first thing you do is printing into the console hello world, right? Hello world. That's the most iconic thing, right? Here in Unity, there's a library for the debugging, and there's like the log. There's different types of logs, so log warning or log error, and that will just like I will show you later how the console will display them. But I have my debug.log. I can go here in the start and say just those warning on start function, and then we can go and say this one will be annoying, so I'm just gonna say dot log error on update. Okay, so let's go back into our game. And you see here, I don't have the console open. It will appear here though. Or I can just go ahead and open the console if I go to general and console. For now, I'm just gonna, yeah, let's open it and put it over here because we don't care, right? So we will see here these three little objects. So the console is very powerful, and it's something that you will be using very often. Here I'm showing, I want to see all my general like log messages, my warning messages, and my error messages, and I can toggle them on and off. Okay, so I'm gonna start. I can clear, I can collapse them. So if I have the same message, for example, the update, they will be just shown in the same one, and I just have a counter. I can clear my messages every time that I hit play, which is pretty good, or every time that I build. So I'm gonna show something quick for you guys to notice. Like even though I created this script and I have this, it won't run because it doesn't exist in my scene. That's what we talk about, right? So if I go to my console, there's nothing. So let's put it here. Like my console doesn't have anything because I'm not running this script. If I wanted to run, I have to attach it somewhere in my objects. So I'm just gonna put it into my player controller. Here I have my controller, and now if I hit play, I will start seeing my messages. So if we go here, I just see hello world, then I see on start function. So we went first on our awake, then on the on start, and you see that's a warning, and then my errors is the on update, and you can see that it's happening pretty often. Every frame is happening. If I had this bigger, because if it's too small it's hard to see, I can toggle these ones off or just see these ones. I can, if I don't collapse them, I will just get them all that. I can see here the number. So the console is very, very powerful, and it's good to know. Sometimes make sure that you have the toggle correctly, because you could be missing an error or missing something and think that it's not getting into that place just because you don't have it toggle. Okay, let's hit pause, save here, and we will go back here, and we don't really need any of this, right? So we can get rid of this, and we don't even need the awake right now. Okay, so we know about our script. We need to attach some extra things into our player to be able to work with it. So one first thing we require is a nice component that Unity has, which is the rigid body. 2D, of course, because we are not 2D one. Our rigid body will handle basically our physics of the object. It will handle like gravity and movement and all those kind of things. Right now, our player does have gravity. So if I hit play, you will see that my player will start falling. There you go. And it's going, as I told you, it's going through our platform. If I put it here, our player will fall and it just collided. You see, it's colliding with our platform, but not with this one because it doesn't have a collider. So let's quickly add into our platform just a box collider and just change that so it's pretty much on ground, and here we want it there, and we want it there. All right, all right, all right. So that looks nice, right? Okay, now that we have that there, I just want to go ahead and open again our player script. Uh, 1 second. Okay, so what we want to do is we have, let's hit apply to this guy. There you go. Save. And we are going to open our script. For those who don't know much about programming, I'm gonna try to make my best and go slow and explaining as much as I can how to use, how to program, and how does like the logic goes and things like that. So the first thing we want to do is in this section I will be creating our variables. So every time on Unity on a, or like in, not in a Unity, like on development, you have to create some variables that then you want to use in your functions. So these are functions or like methods, right, that you can call as we just saw. For example, these ones, because our Unity properties, proprietary, they run according to some to the logic that we just saw of the execution order, but we can call our own methods. But we are gonna start first here creating some nice variables. One of the variables that we need is to get access to that rigid body that we created, like the component we added to our player. That rigid body, we need to access it to be able to use it. So we need the first, whenever we are doing a variable, we need the like the level of access, the access level of that variable. We could make it private, or we can make it public. We can go for protected, but right now what we wanna use most of the times will be either private or public. What does this make is that is basically, yeah, the level of access that we have to for that variable. If we don't assign access level to our variable, it will be private by default. This will let us, because as you can see, I have one script here. We will be creating more scripts, and other scripts might wanna be able to access that rigid body, like that variable. So we will need to make it public, so other method, like other classes, this is a class called player controller, can access our variable. So right now I'm gonna make it public so you can see it. So public rigid body 2D, and we're gonna call it just our rigid body. Yeah, rigid body. And every time that you finish a sentence, like a piece of code, you need to finish it with this semicolon. Okay, I just want to show you what happened here in our game. If we let Unity compile, here is what it's doing, that this little gear is compiling. And it now shows me, like, I have my player controller and the RB variable, it's here because it's public. Or, well, this doesn't mean that it's public. Like, I could have it being private and it still show here. This is just because with the inspector I'm able to referentiate variables easier. So you can see here I have non-rigid body. So this is similar to our sprite renderer. The sprite renderer has the sprite variable, which is expecting that sprite. Well, we are expecting here a rigid body. One way to just assign it will be dragging and dropping a rigid body here, right? But we are in the same object. Like, there's no it doesn't make any sense to be dragging and dropping a property when it's on the same game object. So we are just gonna get rid of that property. It's gonna make it private, which will also remove it from our inspector. We won't be able to see it unless we add a property to it, but in this case we don't need it. And we need to initialize that variable to be able to use it. How we're gonna do it is we're gonna go into our start function. So as soon as the start function is called, like before the first frame, we are gonna call and we will gonna say RB, which is our variable. We are gonna assign to it. So the equal means whatever, like the variable on the left will be assigned with the value on the right, and it needs to be the same type. So I'm gonna use something from Unity, which is called get component. So this basically is getting a component from this game object, from the game object which this component, which is the player controller, is attached to. So I will say get component, and it's asking me which type of component do you want to get. I want to get a rigid body 2D, and I need to just do this because it's a function, and it will be assigned to my rigid body. So just for the sake of showing you guys how that works, we can do it public so you just see it. So let it run. And it's compiling, finish. So here, let's say we don't have it, right? So we don't have the rigid body. Once we play, like hit play, it will find my player script, and it will go right away and look for that rigid body 2D in this same object, and it will assign it. So now it's assigned. This is in code, and this will happen every time that I start the game, and it will call the start method. Once I stop my game, that reference will be gone. This is good because I don't want to keep that reference here or having to be dragging it. It's just automatically gonna be referenced. Another variable that we want to create, we don't really need this anymore to be public. We will like to have our animator, right? And we're gonna call it an anim. You can call it as you like. Anim. Of course, there is some like variable best practice or like methodologies that you can use. but I will probably add another post into my website talking about like which one they exist, and which one I like the most. But basically, it's like either you assign a variable, like for example, you say rigid and then body, and then it's like capital B. So you start with lowercase and then capital like that, or other types. But I'm not gonna dive in to that right now. Okay, for the anime, we're gonna do exactly the same. Get component, animator, and we just do that. So now we have access to those two things, right? Now, what we wanna do is we need our player to move, right? We wanna our player to start like moving to one side and the other. And one way to do that is to use our keyboard to move around. So I'm gonna start just creating here. Unity has some properties to like read the input from your keyboard. Mm, and I need to put it inside of the update because I needed to the Unity to like keep reading that code, expecting an input from the user. So I'm gonna say if I'm just gonna create an if statement input. So this is the class that I need to use, which is letting me like get the input from to the computer, like from the computer basically. Just get key down. It means when I press a key down, if I just say get key, it will be whenever if it's down or up. And if it's key, get key up, it will be when it's up. But I just need get key down, then the key code, and I'm going to say dot a. And I can just go ahead and say debug dot log a key of keyboard was pressed. Just let's give it a try. It's compiling. Down here you will see the console, and I'm going to press the A key now, and there we go. A key of keyboard was pressed. If I put this here so you guys can see it better, every time that I press it, I'm getting it 2, 3. If I uncollapse, there you go. I'm pressing it, pressing it, pressing it. Okay, so that's one way of doing it, right? I can just go and get my input from that key, but that might not be the best way to do it. Like, this is a great code to use, and we will probably be using it for different things, but Unity has something also that help us with these kind of situations, and it's amazing. Like, it's something pretty cool to have. And it's if we go to edit and we go to our project settings, and if we go to input, we have that input that is trying to like look for things, and we can select the horizontal. So the horizontal axis will tell us, okay, this will happen, like this will be called, like no, Unity will know the horizontal axis was used whenever the negative button, which is left arrow basically, or the positive button, which was the right button, or the alternative button will be A or D, right? And we have like the dead point, like this is when I'm clicking it, the gravity, like there's a bunch of things that we can use, but basically this also matches to like a joystick, so it is way more powerful, and it will track way more input for the same thing we were doing. So we can go into our script and say, instead of just tracking for A and then for D and then saying, oh, I also want to track my left arrow and my right arrow if I want to walk with those ones, we can just say create a float, right? And we will call the movement on x, the x-axis, right? Or like horizontal input is equal to input dot get axis instead of the key, and we can say horizontal. So the only thing that is a little bit annoying is that you have to put the string name of the axis that you are looking, and it has to match exactly the other one. This is just because you can create your custom one. So I'm gonna create it as horizontal. I'm gonna save it there, and what I'm going to do is that like this movement, whatever I track here, will let me know like if I'm hitting A or D or like left or right, and it will move. That will be like the movement that I have on my X axis, which is pretty good, right? But since that will only track between 0 and 1, we can just check it out here. Log movement is plus horizontal input, right? Let it compile, and we go into our console. We can clear it if we want. Here if I click, so now it's 0. Let's collapse it. If I hit left, you see it's going up to -1. If I hit right, it's going up to 1. So that has a little bit of troubles because we don't want our player just moving like by 1, because like our like physics won't let us move that few. Like we require a little bit more of speed for our player. So what we're gonna do is we can manage the speed of our player. So here we can say these are just like components of the player controller class. Now we say variables that control our player. So we can create a float speed, right? And just so we can change it from the inspector, show serialize field. Okay, so what we are doing is we are adding some variables that we are gonna be able to modify here. So our speed doesn't require to be public right now, maybe. Like for example, if we're playing on a game where your player will step like on like a muddy place or something like that, and you want to slow down the player, you will have this like on public, or maybe you have a function that changes the speed of your player so it moves slowly. Or if you're poison or something like that. And what we want to do instead of like debugging this is we're gonna say that our horizontal input is going to be equal, right, to, there's two ways. So on programming, there's two ways to do this. We want to multiply the value of this variable of what we just gathered by our speed. So we can say horizontal multiplied by speed, right? Or there's some like typing that we can change, and you just gotta make sure that you have the right version of your typing, that so it will match. But basically this one will always work. So instead of doing that way, you will just say horizontal input multiplied equal speed. What this is doing exactly the same as we had before. It's multiplying the variable by speed and saving it into that variable. All right. So now that we have that, what we want to do is do our rigid body dot velocity. So basically we are getting here, this is a method that the rigid body has. So you can see vector2 rigid body. So what it's doing is there's two types of methods. One is to the get and the other is the set. I can get the velocity, so the linear velocity of my rigid body, or I can set, if I add the equal here, the velocity of my rigid body. As you can see here, it gives us the tip that is a vector2. So if I want to assign the velocity of this rigid body, I need to assign it with a variable that is a vector2 variable, because it's expecting the x and the y values. So I will say new vector2, my horizontal input, right? And I want to keep the same velocity on y. So rb dot velocity dot y. This is one way of doing it. The other way would have been I create just an empty, like I just store my rigid body velocity in a variable. I change the x position and then I assign it to this one. But here I'm doing it just one line, and you most of the times will like to keep things in just one line. I'm just gonna go ahead here and say keep it the other way around, just for you guys. If you come later, it will be easier to understand what's going on. Here I just assigned the velocity of my little player. Okay, so why don't we just go ahead and give it a try. I am going to set the speed of my player, just to start, to 6. Right? I have like Unity start like giving you some warnings. It's just like, hey, you should do this or that. For example, here it's saying like the player controller dot speed is never assigned and will always have its default value to 0, which is not true because I have um, my inspector here to assign it. That's why these ones are just like that. Okay, so let's hit play and we will be able to see our player that it's walking. Like if I hit right or left, the guy will move, and if I hit A or D, the guy will still move. If I change my speed here to 10, for example, my player now goes way faster. If I leave it to 0, then my player won't be able to move because it's just 1. It actually kind of be moving, but it's too low. Or well, actually it's not moving because I'm multiplying by 0. This will be like the movement by 1. That's why I like the 6. I think 6 is good enough, and our player is moving, right? Okay, now we have our player moving. That's amazing, right? What we want to do now is we don't want to get our update too convoluted. So all of this that was written here, we are gonna create a new function. As I told you, we can have functions that that we can call to run code. And similar to what I did like with the parenting, that I just encapsulate something here so I'm able to move it and things like that, I can sort of do something similar with coding. I will create a private, which and remember, so when I create a function, I need to also do access level. So for example, private, or if I leave it without of it, it will be the default. Then I need to tell what's the type of variable that I will return. For example, these two methods, they don't return anything. So if I call them, they won't return anything, and that's the void. So if I say void, I won't return anything, and then it's just the name of my method. So I want to call it update controls. So this will just keep tracking of the controls that I change. I will put all of this here. If I leave it like that, the code we will not run. So if we check it out, if I hit play, and if I use the arrows or the A and D, my player won't move. That's because you see I'm using them and it's not moving. That's because like that method that I created is my method and is not being called by Unity at any point. So that's why I need Unity to say, okay, you update controls, I need to call that function. The parenthesis is if I need to receive a variable. And then here, that's why I have the same parenthesis if I need to send a variable. In this case, we don't need any variables. We are just like putting that code there so that it looks a little bit cleaner. Okay, so now we are going to do something pretty fun. And is we're gonna check if our rigid body dot velocity and the velocity on the x-axis if it was greater than 0. If the velocity is greater than 0, it means we are moving to the right, right? Sorry, 0. It means we are moving to the right. And if we say then else if, because if not, then we will be tracking the position 0 and we don't want that, like velocity equals to 0. We need to say our velocity it's less than 0. And now we can track when our player is going right or left. Then the other thing we want to, like what we want to do with this, it's that we want to change the orientation of our player. There's two things we could do here. One is just flip our player, like our sprite, like this. Oh, just compiling. We could go ahead and just flip our sprite, but as you can see, there's a problem there. You see, like the collider is not perfectly aligned, and it will look like now my when it's right here, both fits are a bit inside of the collider. Here, one fit gets outside. One way to fix that is just changing this to -1, and there you go. Like my player is like changing directions, but is not affected by the sprite. So if we go ahead and we say that, how do we do that? Like how do we access this? Because we don't have a variable for it, we didn't create it. That's because Unity, because it's a game object, it has already granted access to that component. And we just need to say transform. We will be using this a lot. And we can access, we have here three variables, as you can see, the position, rotation, and the scale. So we want to go and say the local scale, we don't want the global scale, to be changed to new, and it will give us like, it needs to be a vector 3 because it's expecting x, y, and z. So we say if it's to the right, we just go 1, and it's telling me you need float variables. So 1f, 1f, and 1f, right? And if we are going to the left, we will be saying -1. Now, if we go into our game and we let it compile, hit save, and we hit play, we will see our player now facing the right direction every time that we go to the right direction. So that's nice. And the collider is still inside, like it's perfect. Okay, now our player looks like he's always on the idle state. So why don't we just go and hook up the animations so our player is actually moving as well, because that will be cool to have, right? Like at least because we are about to finish today's session, it will be cool to see our player all actually walking. So we are going to first commit our changes. Just let's go into our scripts. So we're gonna add the scripts folder with the scripts, and we will say add player controller with basic movement. And we are going to say here add collider to floating platform and add player controller to player prefab here. And you will see that the material is the only one that I haven't used, and I will use it soon. Sample scene, add player rigid body. Okay, and let's push that. And okay, we are back. We want to go into our code, and the same we did here. We most likely want another function because the animations will probably be called pretty often. So we are going to say update animator. You notice that Unity is complaining like, hey, that function doesn't exist. Unity has a great thing here, which is like a suggestion on how to fix those errors. And here is suggesting me, hey, do you want me to create that method that is called update animator? I can just go ahead and click create it. He will go and create for me that method. He's creating it private. I can just remove that. It's exactly the same. And I don't need this exception. Okay, so I have my update animator, and what I want to do in my update animator is to update the speed. So like my I want the animator to know about the speed, like the velocity of my player. How is it moving? Mm, for that, we are going to our animator. And in our animator, there's here layers and parameters. In our parameters section, we can add a float, and we are going to call it speed with capital PS, sorry. And what we are doing here is from idle, we want to make a transition to the walk animation, right? And we want to say that it happens whenever the speed is greater than 0. So whenever our rigid body tracks that the speed of our player became greater than 0, we are gonna go there. There's another thing pretty important here, and is the has exit time. This means that because that could happen like at one point of the animation happening, like you saw that the animation will like run, right? That could happen. Let me show you. So the animation will be running here on the animator, you see? It could happen at any given point of time. Like maybe the speed will change at the middle or at the beginning or something. If we have this checked, then our animator will wait until this is finished to move to the next one. If we remove it, it will just cut it and move to the next one. I'm just gonna leave it so you guys see it, but we need to hook up that speed. So let's go back here, and in order for us to say update our animator, right? We are going to say anim, which is our animator variable. We are going to say set float. We need to give the ID or the string of the variable speed, right? And then we are going to give the value. If we give the straight ahead like the rb dot velocity dot x, this is gonna cause a problem because this will give positive and negative velocity as we just saw here. When we are going left, it's gonna be x. We don't want that. We don't want the velocity. We just want the speed, like how fast is he moving. So we basically need the absolute value of this. Unity has this nice um, library which is called mathf, which comes with a lot of mathematical like operations for us to use, which the first one it comes to be the absolute value of. This will basically just return the value without the negative sign. So if it's going to the right by 5 of speed, it will return 5. If it's going to the left on minus 5 of speed, like on minus 5 on velocity, it will just return 5. So it will always be positive, and our animator will always show us the right, like the right speed. So let's go ahead and try it out. I'm going to move this animator here so just we can see it. So our speed is there. You see that? So as you can see, now our player is walking and now it's stuck there because we don't have a way to come back. But if you saw there, it waited until I finish here to be able to move to our walk. If we remove this, it will be able to just cut it in the middle and go to the next part. Or like however we set our transitions here. Okay, but we need to add another little piece here, and it's what happens when we, how do we go back to the idle? Like if we are not moving anymore, we need to be able to go back. So we can add, make a transition here, and we will say it will go back whenever the speed is less than 0.1, right? That basically means whenever the speed goes to 0, we want him to go into idle mode. And in the same case, we don't want him to keep like walking until it finishes the animation and then go to idle, because it will look weird. So we're just gonna remove that, and we're gonna hit play, and we will see our player in idle mode. Here is in idle, and as soon as I walk, he will start walking. You will notice there's a bit of delay to start walking, and that is just because what I was telling you about the transition. So if I go to this transition, it's telling me that the transition duration, like how long it takes from here to start the other animation, is basically a 1 frame. So I would like to set this to 0, and now every time that I just pressed, it will right away start like walking, like right in the second. And for the stop, it's not that bad, like it takes a little bit to come back, it's fine. So okay, now we have our player and he is walking, and that's our player moving there. I can zoom in a little bit if you guys want to see the player, and here looks a little bit nicer. That's our player moving. So if you feel like maybe it's not matching too much the movement and the speed, you can go ahead and tweak here the speed. Here maybe it has to be a little bit slower, so the player, like, it looks more according to that walking animation. Or you would like to have that speed back to 6, but if you wanted the animation to look faster, you will have to just change it here on the walk animation and change the sample so it walks faster. But essentially, that's how we are gonna hook up all of our other animations. So in the next episode, we will be covering how to set it up to actually like jump, and how to attack, and how to start like actually doing those, because here we are only like, that's just an animation. We had to also make it so it actually moved, so we need to create a function to actually jump, track the jump, and whenever we do something, track our attack. But for now, that's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed it and you learn pretty much how to set up your scene. You can start creating a much bigger scenario with a lot of platforms and things and more detail, and you have a player that is able to walk around. Um, just before we finish, we I will like commit this for you guys. So on the repo, if you go and don't like pull the repo, you can get from here and start like playing around, like looking at this, and maybe you can start like uh, giving it a chance on how you will implement the jump, for example, and then you can check it out on the next episode how I gonna do it. It's just one way of doing it. There's a lot of ways to do, for example, jumping. That's one of the uh, different type of things that you can do in a different manner. But for now, that's pretty much it. I will, as always, upload um, our session into my video, so into my channel. So if you go to my channel, you will be able to see the previous sessions, and I will be uploading this one as well. If you want to follow it along, like the video and post it every time, so you can like really do everything at the same time. And on the next class, we will be covering all the other aspects of the game to actually get to that point. Probably next class we will be moving a little bit faster. We will be covering way more things on the player, how to like collide and all of those things. For now, thank you so much, guys, and everything you need, just let me know, and I will be able to help you out. Have a wonderful night. See you on the next session.